It's that time of year again. You know it well, when the evil globalist elites from around the world get aboard their Gulfstream jets and gather in Davos, Switzerland to planned world domination. They've got a plan. And the annual meeting there, held by the Socialist World Economic Forum, headed by de facto dictator Klaus Schwab, whose life goal is, of course, to force the Great Reset upon us, a.k.a. you will own nothing and you will be happy. Privacy and private property be damned. Forget about those quaint old-fashioned notions. Davos usually consists of, out-of-touch politicians pontificating about things like climate emergency and, poisonous capitalism. Of course, they're all filthy rich, but never mind that. And collectivist experiments that steal away nation sovereignty, the usual stuff. But this year, the first order of business for these wannabe commies is Disease X. We got a new one. It's like Wuhan 2, but worse, much worse. They're preparing.
Although it came immediately, we were preparing for like disease. You may even call as the first Disease X. It may happen again.
That was de facto dictator number 2, World Health Organization chief Tedros. He's very largely responsible for the global pressure campaign that forced us into lockdowns all over the world, mandates, arbitrary public health crises declared everywhere in the world. And he's getting ready to do it all again with Disease X. Sounds like a cable TV series, doesn't it? And arguing that since it's a matter of when and not if nations need to comply with and sign on to pandemic agreement. There's a big pandemic agreement they want the whole world to sign on to, which would ram through changes to international law, naturally, and give the World Health Organization and the World Economic Forum powers unimagined before over our own government indefinitely, naturally, because that's the way they like it. He wants the agreement signed by this May. Why the rush, you might ask, to sign away our sovereignty? Well, because Disease X may not be so hypothetical after all, because more shady experiments are currently underway, we have just learned, in, guess where? Anybody? China. In a new Wuhan-esque study, Beijing scientists with links, surprisingly, to the Chinese military, the communist military, have cloned a like virus found in pangolins, which is a scaly-looking anteater, and found that the mutant virus strain that they created has a 100% kill rate. Every single mouse in the study died. Hey, mazel tov, that's a big success for them. With all within 8 days of infection. So they infect the mice, every one of them dies within 8 days, and researchers describe this as surprisingly quick. To make matters worse, of course, the team also found a high viral load in the mice's brains and eyes, something not seen with, of course. Symptoms included their eyes turning completely white, like zombie mice. What happens in these Chinese labs doesn't always stay in these Chinese labs. In these scientific paper, the researchers warned that their findings underscore a spillover risk into humans of GXP2V, which is, what they're dubbing this lethal virus. They always give it a catchy name like that. That'll catch on, I think. So make no mistake. These globalists at Davos, the Chinese communists, scientists in Beijing, they might not be preparing for imaginary situations, but rather assembling their next global power grab, because they're here to save us after they create the virus in a laboratory. And with obedient Joe Biden at the helm here in the United States, conveniently, and another election year is upon us, and he's not going to do anything to stop them, of course.
A thick plume of globalist arrogance rests over Davos, Switzerland this week, just below the vapor trails from all the private jets. The billionaires are back at the World Economic Forum, where a few hundred people work to decimate the lives of billions around the world, safe in the knowledge that they'll not only be able to avoid the disaster that they're implementing, they'll somehow benefit from it as well. Two budding German dictators do a lot of the talking at the WEF, Klaus Schwab and Ursula von der Leyen, showing us a new, softer form of authoritarian German fascism.
The top concern for the next 2 years is not conflict or climate. It is disinformation and misinformation.
We risk to become much more ego-centered and on a national and individual level. To break this cycle, we need a paradigm shift. We must rebuild trust.
I really hope that the World Economic Forum will take this issue on board and think harder about the role that the private sector can play in standing up against disinformation. I have given up on X, what a scary name that even is, right?
Just a full-on assault on what really is the indicator of free speech, especially in the social media world these days, which is Twitter, they call X now. You have the head of the EU, the founder of the World Economic Forum, a Harvard professor, all thirsting for a world that they control, where you are just a silenced little hamster on a wheel. Senator Rand Paul is the author of the new book, Deception, the Great COVID Cover-Up. What is your take on the Davos agenda?
You know, I think the only time that disinformation is really a problem is when it's funded by the government, and when the government takes your taxes, unifies the taxes with the police power, and then somehow decides to squelch other opinions. We've never really had a problem in our country with disinformation because we have lots of information and lots of opinions. There are right opinions, left opinions, center opinions, and with the internet, there's even been a plethora of more opinions and more places to go look for information. And it's a very elitist point of view that thinks that somehow an individual has a monopoly on knowledge and they should limit others from, going and looking for knowledge themselves.
Our success depends on a coalition of strong and independent nations that embrace their sovereignty to promote security, prosperity, and peace for themselves and for the world. That is why America will always choose independence and cooperation over global governance, control, and domination. The free world must embrace its national foundations. It must not attempt to erase them or replace them. For decades, the same tired voices proposed the same failed solutions, pursuing global ambitions at the expense of their own people. And I am proudly putting America first, just as you should be putting your countries first.
Watch and see how their approach has harmed their own citizens. Bans on energy, farming. They put their countries and their own last. Donald Trump knew what the globalists, whether at the World Economic Forum or at the annual UN meeting or the G7 summits or the G20 summits, he knew what they really wanted and he called them out on it. He said, what is taboo and say in their own circles, which is, I love my country first and foremost, and you should too. That, Trump said, was the key to both national and global success. The Davos agenda, the global security order, an integrated world economy. Sure sounds nice, but to whom? For whom? They say they want decarbonization, gender equality, the abolition of extreme poverty. Again, all sounds good on paper, but it's not real, and Trump knew. And the thing is, they know, too, that 2024 is clearly Trump and MAGA's year. And you can smell the desperation. Their rhetoric gets more adamant. They say there's no choice but to follow their whim.
Last year, 2023, was literally the most climate disruptive, most climate consequential, negative year in human history. Doesn't leave us any space for debate or, frankly, procrastination any longer.
Get that? No space for debate, he says openly, which means we're right, you're wrong, you got to take it. Davos is a whole lot of know-nothing presented as knowing everything. A coup d'etat by technocratic corporatists with mediocrity and sycophancy inscribed on their faces, and Trump knew it.
And then they thrive off of the assumption that people cannot figure anything out for themselves and that we need them to dictate what is true and what we can hear, and that's exactly what everybody at that conference seems to agree with, except for one maybe. This is Javier Milei, Argentina's new president, who had a very powerful speech. Shocked that they invited him, but here he was in Davos.
Today, I'm here to tell you that the Western world is in danger. And it is endangered because those who are supposed to have to defend the values of the West are co-opted by a vision of the world that inexorably leads to socialism and thereby to poverty. Unfortunately, in recent decades, motivated by some well-meaning individuals willing to help others, and others motivated by the wish to belong to a privileged caste, the main leaders of the Western world have abandoned the model of freedom for different versions of what we call collectivism. We're here to tell you that collectivist experiments are never the solution to the problems that afflict the citizens of the world. Rather, they are the root cause.
It reminds me of Trump at the UN or Trump at Davos. I mean, when these freedom fighters come into these nests, I mean, they go into the lion's den and kind of throw the truth at them. It's powerful to hear that.
Yeah, you know, I've been pretty amazed. I've watched a couple of the interviews, and the new president of Argentina is some kind of guy. I mean, it sounds like he's been trained in classical Austrian economics, free market, willing to challenge the idea of central banking in his country. And if you watch him interview, he's, you know, very quick-witted, smart guy, pretty impressive. It'd be amazing if we could get someone like that to be our leader in our country.
すごい。さすがもう大倉正之助はもうこのね、お能の世界の方ですから。
本当ですよね。そのね、正之助さんが毎週ここに
ね、今日は残念ながらね来ていただけなかった。
北海道なんですよ。
あ、今日北海道からこれ。
ちょっと無理ですよね。
もうほとんどの場合来ていただけますからね。これはもう本当。これね、正之助さんが大包み、小包みの方もいらっしゃってね。一番向こう側にいるのよ、正之助